Good morning. Something to do this morning, and I hope you will come along with me. Very close friends of mine, you might know them, Paul and Joe Marsh. They live in Cape Town. Started a channel, actually about a year ago, called Essence of Overlanding. It's telling the stories of overlanders and how they managed to do amazing things. And some of the people that they've interviewed, their journeys, are really inspiring. And I actually think the Essence of Overlanding is a very, very good name for what they're doing. They're distilling the essence of what overlanding and expedition travel is all about. So it being very close to the 1 year anniversary, I think it's a bit more actually now. It's now October 2022, and they've asked me if they can do an interview with me. However, me being in Australia, them being all the way over there, instead of doing a direct interview, Joe has sent me a list, and I'm now going to allow Joe to interview me on camera while I set up my camp early morning and make some coffee, mooch around, and... Right, Joe, you are asking me, where and when did your life in overlanding begin? When I was 12, I was living in South Africa with my parents. My father took us as a family, he's a very adventurous man, to the Okavango Delta. Those of you who don't know what that is or where that is, I mean, it is an astonishing part of the world, and my favourite part of the world, period, even now. It's an area in Botswana that changed my life.
We are now at the Okavango swamps, and you can hear in the background the croaking of frogs and the noise of insects. The sky is very dark, and bright stars appear, and the horizon is much lighter.
Because it is so beautiful and so extraordinary and so unusual, it is unique. 1972, I was 12 years old, and my father took a whole family there, and we went there in a Triumph 2000. It was just a saloon car. And by the time we had actually got back home, 3 weeks later, my seat, I was sitting in the back, my feet were 8 inches higher than knees because of the dents in the floor pan of the car. And there was something that happened there that changed my life forever. And it was, we were, it's going to be a long one, sorry. We were on an island. We had motored the way to the island during the day, and there was a man called Lloyd Wilmot. He was a pioneer of the Okavango, and he built several camps there, and he was actually building a camp while we were his guests. And we were driving along, I was sitting in a Land Rover. It was probably a Series 2, it was a short wheelbase, probably a 2, and we were going along a runway that he was building, so it was smooth-ish, and he saw a hyena and decided to chase it. So he swung the wheel around. My brother and I was sitting in the middle of the front bench seat, my brother next to me here, and Lloyd started chasing the hyena, and there was nothing to hold on to, and we hit an anthill, and I levitated out of the seat, tumbled right over, and landed in the back on the spare wheel. This was the best thing that had ever happened to me in my life.
And I can see the shining, gleaming waters, and I can hear the noise of the insects and frogs.
It was just, and of course that was a mixture of expedition, because we were in such a remote. Then I think there were a total of 4 camps in the entire Okavango Delta, and it was building one of them, and so it was incredibly remote. So that idea that we were incredibly remote was amazing to me. That this didn't work. Proof again that men cannot multitask. So, let's try this again. There you go. So, extraordinary place, and of course now a four-wheel drive. And that was the gelling of those two elements for me. What inspired you to start making films, to tell stories and offer insights to fellow overlanders? What inspired me? What? I was going to say, because I made a business of it, I was going to say what inspired me to tell story, I was broke, but that's not actually the case. It was a part of a career change, and okay, there was a moment. I was editing. I had my own post-production film editing business. I had 4 people working with me. I had 5 people, 2 other editors, a producer, and a runner. Actually, 6 person, and then a never mind. And I got sick of it. I got tired. I was in the advertising industry, and I got just so worn out by the advertising industry, and I remember we were moving into a new house, and the house was actually also going to be. It had a studio attached to it. Had 2 editing rooms, and I remember I had my Range Rover at the time was green in colour. I had met Gwyn not long before, and our neighbour came over and said, "Wow, nice Range Rover. I've just built a Series 2 Land Rover. It's taken me 3 years to rebuild it, and I want to go exploring, but I have absolutely no idea what to do." I had already, by that stage, and that would have been in 1987, done many expeditions to Botswana, to Namibia, different parts of South Africa, Lesotho, and I had done a lot of off-road driving, a lot of it. And so I thought, well, maybe I should write a book. There were no books, none. Of course, the internet didn't exist then. There were no books. Well, I say no books. There were no books that were Southern Africa-centric in any way at all. And I had a book by a British author called Jack Jackson, who I still have a copy of the book. It's one of my treasured possessions, actually, because it was the first book I ever bought about four-wheel driving, and it doesn't even mention tire pressures at all anywhere in the book. So you can see then good information about four-wheel driving and overlanding was scarce. And I thought, write a book. And it was not to replace film editing. I wrote the book, but actually what happened while I was writing that book is that we got so tired, Gunn and I got so tired of the advertising industry that we actually decided to pack up and leave, and we went to run a lodge in the Okavango, that same place. And that, again, was the second time the Okavango changed my life. So I started writing the book. In the Okavango, we had no electricity or anything like that, so I had to improvise. I then learnt about solar panels. I bought myself a 60-watt crystalline panel and took it up. I bought myself a little inverter. I still have it, actually. It was the first time inverters had become solid state. Before this time, an inverter was a big, heavy thing, and now it was a very small, compact item. It was only 60 watts, but it could run my Apple Mac. And I started writing. And of course, the strange, ironic thing was we were living on an island with no four-wheel drives at all, and I was writing a four-wheel drive book. There were no vehicles on that island at all. We used to get everywhere by a mokoro, dugout canoe, or motorboat, and all our kit would be brought in by light aircraft. And so I wrote the book. When we left running the camp a year later, we went back to Johannesburg. We restarted our editing business, but we knew it was temporary. It was a stopgap. I did some wedding photography, and Gwyn went back to work for a bank in Johannesburg, but we knew it was a stopgap. We knew it. The book, I went to Southern Books. Southern Books was a very, very highly prized publisher, and they said no, they weren't interested. And I actually went to 5 other publishers until eventually one said, yes, we'll publish your book. And that book, in fact, went out of print in 2017, if I'm not... I worked it out, it was 24 years in print, that book and various editions of it, in South Africa non-stop for 24 years. And that book is still available on my website. There is a version of that book just for download and for e-readers. That, Joe, is what inspired us. Next question I have from Joe is, when did my journey start with Paul? That's quite easy. Paul was living in the United Kingdom, and he was importing quite a lot of South African equipment, some of South Africa's best equipment, into the UK. One of the brands I remember very clearly was Easy On. And we started chatting, and he said, hey, can I distribute some of your books? And I remember sending him a couple of boxes of books, and in fact we actually made an international edition of the book, hardcover. I think we printed 1,000 of them, and a good portion of them went to Paul in the UK, and it actually had the best cover of any book I ever published. Beautiful cover with a Series 3, I think it was a 3 Land Rover climbing up a hill. I photographed that in Zululand. That would have been, my date, midnight, 1995? No, my website started in 1996. My guess is 1998. All right. I actually do need to drink some of my coffee. I'm using these little Yeti mugs, and I love them because you put the lid on and your coffee stays hot for forever. They're such nice quality little products. I could get a sponsorship from Yeti, but I haven't even tried yet. Lame joke, yes. Okay, not even a very good tried joke. All right, so now, what is one of your most memorable trips with Paul? Oh, my most memorable trip with Paul is, this is an easy one because there's also a most memorable moment with Paul. We did a trip and we were working with Safari Drive. He had built some Land Cruisers for them in Cape Town. Those vehicles are, I believe, still operating even today. That would have been 2000 and... would that have been 15? I think that would have been 2015. It might have been 16. We decided, I kind of decided, I wanted to go to some places in Namibia and Botswana, even more remote than the places that I'd already been to. We went to Drotsky's Caves and the Aha Hills in far northwestern Botswana, then hopped over the border and drove through Bushman land. And I remember camping on the edge of this very, very broad gravel plains, grassed plains in Bushman land. Beautiful country. Now, did you know, this was told to me by Mike Main, this very well-known writer, explorer in the Kalahari, and I've done a couple of trips with him.
Amazing man. Amazing.
He pointed out to me that black line is in fact the Earth casting its shadow on its own atmosphere. Wow, how about that? And the trip took us then to and the most memorable moment was in far northern Namibia, where we were driving on the Marienfluss, and you're not allowed to camp on the Marienfluss because they're worried about people just driving everywhere and ruining the landscape. These gravel plains in Namibia, like most gravel plains, are incredibly sensitive to vehicles. The tracks take you 50, 60, 80 years to disappear. Literally, it's not an exaggeration. And so the landscape is scarred with tire tracks. And that's why they don't allow it. No camping on the Marienfluss. You drive through it and drive back. But the trouble is the Marienfluss is so beautiful, and I wanted to photograph it at sunset. So we weren't allowed to camp on it. So we thought, okay, well, we have to get off the Marienfluss if we want to camp in the area. So we drove and drove and drove and drove and drove. And we stopped, and there's some beautiful pictures of the two of us. And one of my favorite, I use as one of my 4X Overland branding pictures. I'm standing by the Land Cruiser. Paul took a shot of me, the starlight and that beautiful fading light. And we drove through the night for, I guess, another hour or so in darkness, very slowly. And we left the Marienfluss by heading a westerly road that took us between two hills onto an area called the Hartman Valley. And as we entered the Hartman Valley, we thought, okay, well, the restrictions of camping are not here. However, we still wanted to make the minimum possible impact on the environment. Absolute minimum. We didn't drive off, we parked our cruiser on the track. We rolled out our bedrolls on the ground behind the Land Cruiser on the track. And the moment was waking up in the morning. Maybe I should just play you that scene. Wind came up, in the middle of the night, a little chilly.
I'm on my 14th day of an expedition to the most remote parts of all of southern Africa in Hartman Valley, northern Namibia. We're waking from our ultra-low impact camp. My travelling companion Paul Marsh is making coffee.
As part of our low impact camp, we even put our bedrolls on the track itself. And I was lying in bed last night thinking to myself, we should have put our warning triangles up on the track up there, actually, even though, following the track last night, nobody had come down this road in a long, long time. The track is barely visible. I mean, you can see it in places, but in places it vanishes almost completely. So very few vehicles come down here, but I was thinking we probably should have done that. No tents, no fire, and all our impact is on the track itself. I think I'm getting coffee. Bacon and eggs. I know what I'd like, some of those little chipolata sausages. Could you do that?
Chipolatas? Next time. You're obviously woken up from a dream.
I am in a dream.
You're in a dream.
I'm in a
The
dream.
reality is that coffee's about it.
Not a bad dream. Not a bad one. I dreamt about Gwyn last night.
Yeah, what did you dream?
She was being very nice to me. No, don't read anything into it. Come on, this is not Freudian. Don't read anything into it. She was just being nice to me.
Been alone for a week too long.
No, she wasn't being that nice to me. Fantastic. Oh, you're taking her around that way, are you?
The rusks are here.
Yeah, very funny.
Coffee's about here somewhere. Did you see what?
Joe asks the question, what shots or stories did you wish you had captured? Again, a really good question because it's insightful. It's not. It's what did you miss, or saw and witnessed and didn't manage to capture? And it's a difficult question to answer because I don't know. And I'll give you an example why. When I started my television career in 2006, and I'd done 2 series, and then I started doing a little bit more adventurous stuff, and I decided to cross the Kalahari solo. It was my very, very first pure solo long-distance remote expedition, and I crossed the Kalahari. And episode 1, it actually, those of you who know, it actually failed. Doesn't look so good for my trip. And on the first night, I was camped next to my vehicle, as I am now, and it was dark. There was no moon. There was nothing to do. It was 6:30 or 7, and I put a table down and I started to write.
To ask, has the experiment of travelling on my own been a success?
I was also writing a regular for a South African magazine called Getaway, and I started writing my article, and suddenly a lion roared. Now, when a lion roars, you can hear it several kilometres away with ease. It's a very low frequency sound, so it carries through the bush at enormous distances. This was the other side of the car, and you know that expression, your blood runs cold? Well, I actually this is what happened. There's a moment that I didn't capture.
I was just next to the fire, next to the car. It's about 7:30, just relaxing. I heard the strange noise. There's a lion, and he's right here. He started roaring. So, I had stuff outside, all the car doors were open, and I didn't think that there would be a lion around. So I quickly ran around, closed all the car doors, and I'm sitting in the driver's seat thinking, well, how am I going to set up camp to go to sleep? Because wherever the lion is, it's very, very close. Sure. It gave me a fright.
Because the camera wasn't running, and wish I had. But my first instinctive reaction was, I literally leaned over. The door was here, and the seat would have been here, car seat, and I was here. And I literally leaned over and grabbed the camera and pressed the go button. Literally in one movement, bang, record. Because remember, it's recording sound as well as picture. I then climbed up and got into the car with the camera recording in case something else happened. At least then there would be a sound recording of it. And so I then got into the car and pointed the camera at myself, vlogging style. You must remember that this was 2009. Vlogging wasn't a thing. Pointing selfies were not a thing. I honestly think I invented the genre of selfies.
I'm now waiting on the banks to film Longfellow coming down the Wilke River. We're about 2 hours from Frankfurt, 5:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday. I'm just waiting for her to come around the corner and the river down there.
I hardly invented it, but I was one of the first people ever to do it. And I think I was almost certainly the very, very first person who was doing overlanding to point a camera at myself and make a film. That's the only one I can think of, because I have my vehicle set up so that I can grab a camera really, really quickly. And if I'm on a trip, I literally just lean over, grab. And I think I've become quite good at seeing, oh, something's up, something's about to happen. So I'll roll camera before it happens very frequently, because I sense that something is happening. All right, Joe, that's a difficult one. What have been your highlights? Very broad question. What have been your highlights? Okay. Highlights. Well, this isn't one of them, Joe, because you won't let me get to my coffee. Highlights. Okay, actually, this is easy. I mean, many highlights I could talk about for hours. I'm going to talk about two. In 2010, the year after I did I did the solo expedition to Kalahari. It failed. You must watch that video if you haven't seen it. I'll get Joe to link it in the description. And then a year later, I went and did it again, 2000 and... That's right. Solo was 2009. Successful solo was 2009, 2008, 2009, now 2010. I am going on. The most ambitious expedition that I had ever done was to find the source of the Okavango.
I am almost unable to take it in. I've been on the road for 55 days, and I think I am about to find what I've been looking for.
Part of this, we had to go into Angola and find the source of the Okavango, which I did. And we found what we believed to be the actual small, very, very small stream in an area. It was actually a valley, and it was the highest in the whole area. And it had a small stream running through it, and I then gathered some water at that source.
I have one more important task to perform before I leave the Kabango River. This river is about to take me with it. After a period of exploring more of Angola, I will follow its course down to its end. This river is unique, you see. It doesn't drain into the sea like rivers do, but spills out into the vast Okavango Delta. But my quest is to go beyond this. I will find the very last drop at the very end of its course.
And then followed the Okavango River all the way through Angola. What a beautiful country. I mean, extraordinarily beautiful country. And a challenge to travel through. Even today, it remains a challenging destination for anybody wanting to travel through it. We then travelled all the way along the river, through the Okavango, and ended up, and here's the, so generally speaking, Angola highlight, but probably the highlight of my entire career was seeing the water actually arrive on a river. They hadn't seen water since, I think they said to me it was 1974.
Oh, this is it. This is the water pouring occasion.
This is absolutely amazing.
This is the man I told you. That water has come from the very start of the Okavango.
Yeah. The very top of the mountain.
Is it?
Right at the top.
And now what are you going to do?
What am I going to do?
You're going to help the Okavango, the Boteti, make it
But it's going there anyway.
Yeah, but give it a hand.
Okay.
Good, lovely. Well done. You got to join the two. You got to join the two. You got to make it join.
Is it going to work? Will I have enough? Will I have enough?
Come on. Yes!
I did that shoot in 2010. So do the maths. That's how long those villagers had waited for the Boteti River to flow where they lived. And we witnessed it. I then poured the bottle of water that I'd collected at its uppermost source, and I poured it. The other highlight happened 3 weeks ago. Those of you following the story is that I decided to do the Canning Stock route in Australia for a second time. First time I did it with Paul actually in 2017, and it was a highlight. Yeah. But not quite the highlight of 3 weeks ago. And the reason being is that in the interim, during the COVID pandemic, I had purchased a 1975 built Range Rover 2-door in an effort to kind of relive a bit of my past.
I've been driving for 4 days and have found myself in a situation that I have prepared for. While the Range Rover is running well, organising accommodation for tonight has been impossible.
I didn't want to do this at night. So you can see a few trees over there.
I have no choice but to set up camp somewhere in the bush. I have no tent, very little camping equipment, but sufficient to keep me dry and fed. Welcome to the last chapter in the purchase, collection, preparation and drive across Australia of my 45-year-old Range Rover. There you go, this will work because is that straight? What began as a quest to find and purchase, no matter its state, my Range Rover that I sold 30 years ago has led me to this. Sleeping the night, curled on the back seat, to be woken by the Australian bush calls and being reacquainted with the familiar smell of gear oil. This series of videos is that story. I started with a Range Rover and I actually went looking for my original Range Rover in South Africa. I was actually going to go and buy it and bring it back to Australia. I discovered that it had been scrapped, but by pure serendipity found somebody who had actually purchased the builder's plate and he sold it to me. So that was a lovely story and it was a fantastic stopgap. I have to thank the Off-Road History Museum in United Arab Emirates for their contribution that allowed me to do it. Again, when you have resources, you can do stuff. So I was able to not just buy the Range Rover, and I drove it unsupported all the way across Australia after working on it for just 3 days, and then did a whole lot more work on it, mechanical work, because I wanted to drive it on the Canning stock route, which is a car breaker. And it has this kind of fabled notoriety about it because and I thought it was 2016, but I actually think it might have been a little bit earlier than that. I'm actually not sure of the dates, but there was some Mercedes Geländewagens that did it, and there was a big news press event, and Mercedes-Benz said, "Mission accomplished. I'm sorry you failed. Your cars broke down. They all broke down." It wasn't the Mercedes necessarily the fault. It was the organisers. And I think a lot of them came from Germany, didn't understand what they were up against. They were driving cars with low-profile tyres and street shock absorbers and expected to survive something like the Canning, just because it's a G-Wagon. And they failed. And so there's this kind of notoriety about it. And it's a tough track. It breaks cars, it smashes trailers. There are a lot of car wrecks, mostly burnt out, on the trip, on the route, 1,600 kilometres off-road. My favourite part of Australia, without question. It is glorious. It is just the most beautiful, and the remoteness. What I love about overlanding is when I can find myself in really remote places. This to me is the key to the essence of my overlanding, is finding those remote places. Well, good morning. Beautiful, beautiful night. The morning here was, to me, kind of illustrates what this part of Western Australia is all about. The utter silence, the yellow grass and the sun coming up over it and just presenting the most gorgeous, spectacular morning scene. But I was with some great blokes. And we made a show which was not unlike any other show that I'd ever made. Most of my work is, when I was going to say serious, I mean, I'm often referred to as the David Attenborough of four-wheel driving. I don't really know why. Maybe it's just the hair blowing in the wind that I never brush it. But also the fact that I'm quite serious about it. Maybe I'm English. So most of my content is, I do have a fun now and again, but this was pure fun.
Andrew, Heiner and John have decided to help us out graciously with some modifications on the Range Rover.
Okay.
We've made it suit Rob a lot better.
See what you think.
What do you think?
I'm not impressed.
I'm not impressed either.
It's a beautiful thing, a thing of beauty, and you've defiled it.
Yeah.
just like its driver.
It is a way of me saying, stop taking four-wheel drive so seriously. It's meant to be fun, arguing about whether it's a Toyota or a Land Rover. Really, what a fundamental waste of time. Who cares? Well, you do. Well, why? I get it. If you're really into the machines, yeah, brand. Holden versus Ford, Toyota versus Land Rover, Nissan versus Toyota. I get it. I'm not there. I am, wow, look at this place. Wow. Yeah, I like the car I got here, or I'm thinking about changing it. One of the two, it doesn't matter. The point is that that's a tool, this is the work of art. The tool gets you to enjoy the work of art. That's my thing. But if you can do it with good friends, and we succeeded in driving the Range Rover that whole distance. We had a few mechanical problems with it. It was amazing. Minor mechanical problems, and it was a highlight because I enjoyed the editing process as much as I did actually shooting it out in the desert, because the editing of this story of mates just enjoying themselves was just it's my essence of telling overlanding stories. And in fact, what I've done as a result of it, I'm busy doing it right now, and it'll be launched very soon. Probably January 23. It's called Overland Storytelling. Now, Paul and I already do Overland Workshop, which is where we teach, that both of us, we run this business together. We teach and we share our expertise in helping people get and have successful overland expeditions, called Overland Workshop, and you can buy courses, and there are a number of courses, or you can buy a membership, etc., etc. And Paul and I are really pouring our heart out into this, because we love seeing these success stories that are being presented on Essence of Overlanding. And I'm doing another one called Overland Storytelling, because the storytelling, the thrill of storytelling, it's like I parallel it to, I'm no chef. I don't particularly enjoy cooking much. I'm okay with it, but I'm not a good cook, and it's not what I do. And a lot of people that love cooking, they don't just do it because they like eating that really good food. I think most chefs, the reason why they do it is they get gratification, personal satisfaction of seeing the enjoyment on the faces of others. That's fantastic. I think many artists do the same thing. I think most artists do the same thing. I do that with storytelling. I do that in the edit suite. And I love the accolades. And the latest series, if you haven't seen it, is in many respects, I believe, the best thing that I've done in decades. I think actually the best thing I've done since my expedition to find the source of the Okavango River back in 2010, the series I've just finished now, is the best I've done. So those are my two highlights. You really are getting the old juices flowing here, Joe. She's asked me, what are some of the lowlights? All right, I think I know how to handle this. It's just as well this is live television. In 2013, let's put it this way. If I look, I'm really good at documenting and keeping and archiving material. I have original Super 8 footage from 1977, 76, thereabouts. I still have all of that footage digitized. All my photographs, all my early videotapes, everything digitized. And so if I look at my folders, it's dates of the television series that I made. I started my first television series in South Africa in 2006, and I go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 13. 2013, there's no folder. There's no series. I didn't do a series in 2013. I found in South Africa, when working with commercial television, I found it incredibly stressful. I would spend most of my year looking for sponsors, not making films and not doing expeditions. We had a very successful little mapping company, which I sold in 2008. I sold it because we couldn't keep up with the technology because we didn't have the resources of that our competition had. Those maps, they're still fantastic maps. I even say so myself, even today. South Africa's top overlanding mapping business is called Tracks for Africa, and the one following close behind is Infomap. Infomap were the first maps to publish GPS coordinates on the maps themselves, but in order to do that we had to actually drive and plot. We couldn't use Google Earth, it wasn't accurate enough, and so that was all very good stuff. And then it all kind of came to a close in 2013 when financially it wasn't really working anymore. I'd sold the mapping business in 2008, I think, and the television side was just too difficult. And also we decided to leave South Africa because I felt, Gwyn did too, that there was a poor future for our 3 girls. Wanted to give them a better future. This is what you do as parents. You do your best to, and you make judgment calls, and you try and we then moved to the United Kingdom, and we were there for a little under 3 years, and then moved to Australia. And it is really since I've been in Australia that of course, my work it's kicked back into full speed. 13 was a challenging year to me. I'd lost my father in late 2012, and we didn't do a series in 2013. But now living in England, we did a series for South African television while living in England, and I got a little bit of money to do it, and we were just surviving. I did an amazing trip in Zambia with my daughter Kate in 2015. I would say that's the only low light I can think of. That was that transition from television to YouTube and moving continents twice. That's all I can think of. To sum up, good question. How has overlanding changed your life? Well, to me, obviously, because it's a career, it's my business, I'm very fortunate to have been able to turn my advertising experience all those years ago and film and television, and with my love of overland exploring that I did for many years before it became a profession, combine the two. There are many people in this industry who are like me, but they will go into creating products, and generally speaking they find themselves struggling to find time to go overlanding because they're running businesses. I've made the actual act of overlanding the business, not in the business using my know-how and understanding to create products and therefore run a business around overlanding, that I'm actually doing it. And of course I am, like many other people that use the YouTube and Instagram platforms, to do what we love, share what we do, and people enjoy that, and we've turned our businesses into that, and that's what I've done. So in terms of that, it's fundamental to to what I've become. But I think your question, Joe, is more on a personal level. And how has it changed your life? And here's the deal. Here's the deal. Being in nature is plain good for you. It is this is common to human beings. It's a medicine. It's therapy. It's being close to nature is just plain good for you. It's good for you physically because you're moving and walking around. It's good for you mentally because you have to think for yourself. You have to think on your feet. And you have all of the stimulation from nature, the beautiful color on the trees, animals, insects, flowers, the light changing by the hour. And mentally, where else can you just, where can you, I'm trying to find a word that is not cliched, like unwind, or unravel, or, and overlanding to me has been my vehicle to experiencing those things. Because now, from this place, I can do other things that I love to do. I have now driven, right this very minute, to a lonely spot. There's nobody around. And I can now go for a beautiful walk in these are indigenous forests. Excuse me, I can go for this lovely walk in these forests and I can enjoy the sounds. I can just enjoy what, I'm not an overly religious man, but I also know that listening to a book by Spike Milligan. Well, it's more a documentary about Spike Milligan, and he said something. I was just yesterday on the way here listening to it, and he said, "I refuse to believe that my father was an explosion and my mother was a vacuum." And I'm kind of one of those people that feels that while science will say, well, we can actually explain existence quite well. Sure, you can. It is quite good. And I believe in science. But at the same time, I know that science doesn't know everything, and I don't think science claims to know everything. And the public atheists that rant on about how wonderful it is to be an atheist, I think that your minds are actually closed, and you claim that they're opened by it. I think your minds are closed by it. Because here's a fundamental truth, and that I think everybody on the planet will agree with me. We don't know everything, and there is so much still to learn. And where do you learn it? Places like this. You get in touch with who you are, and your place in humanity, and your place on the planet. That's what overlanding is about for me. Joe, I hope I've answered your questions satisfactorily. And if you will allow me, I'd like to actually run this interview on my channel too. See you next time, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey, sharing our films and following us. And if you would like to see more, please click on the link below, and we'd love you to contribute through Patreon.